2019, this virus emerged in Wuhan, China, and it's in the coronavirus family. And the reason why those types of viruses are called that is because they have these little projections sticking out all over like a crown. And of course, if you followed the news, they always show that one picture of the virus with all the little, and they're called proteins sticking out of it. And that is actually called the spike protein because it does look like a spike. So one of the really important things to remember about this, though, even though it's in the coronavirus family, it was new. They had really never seen anything like this, particularly how rapidly it spread. And at first, how sick it made so many people. I think one of the important aspects of the biology there was when they weren't acknowledging it was happening, people were talking to each other in close spaces, and they were getting a lot of viral particles into their bodies because they were breathing them in, and they got what's called a really high viral load. And that contributed to how sick so many people got in China. And then because nobody really understood what was going on, as you know, a lot of people traveled throughout the world, and it started to spread. So and for a lot of you, it was really hard in the first 4 to 6 months that the ideas around it kept changing. That was because it really was new. It hadn't been experienced before. The closest thing, there was a similar virus called Sars, which actually stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. It was similar, but it was not nearly as infectious. So a lot of the responses were based on that. They were sort of hoping, oh, if we just lock down a little bit, it will be gone, because that was pretty successful then. So again, going back to this virus, and that those spikes on the surface are what the virus uses to enter the cells of our body. So think about all these particles flying through the air, and we suck them all in, and that little piece of protein on the surface is just like a key to a lock on our cells. And that's another protein on the cells of our respiratory tract in our gut called, sorry, this is going to be a big word, the angiotensin converting enzyme 2. Anyway, it's on the outside of all our cells because it's really important for regulating blood pressure. And all parts of our body are important for that. Well, of course, this was an ideal entry site for the virus because it's all over the cells. So that spike fits right in there, and that triggers the cell to suck the virus in, and then it takes over the cell's machinery to make more of itself. It bursts out through the cell and starts spreading throughout the body. And during that same process, we're breathing it out again the whole time. And as an aside, one of the things you're starting to hear a lot about in the last few months are what they call variants. What they are the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the name of this virus. COVID-19 is the disease that it causes. They're selecting for little changes in that outer protein, the spike protein, so it fits even better into the angiotensin 2 converting enzyme, like even a tighter fit. And that tighter fits means it's even more infectious and spreads even better. And so one of the things that unfortunately happens for people that can't, or where their work, when they spread it, even though they don't get sick, they are perfect little factories for making the better virus and better and better. Because the type of virus selected out of the thousands that are in your body that's most infectious and easily transmissible is going to be the winner when you breathe on somebody else. And so these variants spread throughout South Africa and Brazil, and obviously the UK, people, especially in areas where people are in really tight quarters and they really couldn't get enough space from one another. And it is kind of tough because some of the vaccines don't work as well against the variants. It's different enough from the original virus that the antibodies we made in response to the first virus, which is how the vaccines were designed, aren't really as good against the variants. Okay, so why is it that some people don't get sick and some people really do? Well, you may often say, oh, I never get a cold. Oh, I don't get the flu. Or maybe you get everything that comes through. Why? And, like, why are you sick and your friend isn't? And that is our immune system. And I'm not going to go into detail there because it's very complicated, but I'll just simply say there's two major aspects. There are something called T cells, and they're just called that because they originate from the thymus gland, which is about here. But they are our first line of defense. They're actually always on patrol in our body looking for anything that looks wrong, that looks different. And as soon as they identify it, they send a signal out and the other T cells swarm and they start to kill cells that are infected with the virus. So if you have a really good T cell response, you can be infected. You can be transmitting virus for days, but you won't have any symptoms at all. You won't even have the loss of taste and smell that some people describe. So you're churning out virus, but you feel fine. And I've met a lot of people who were so surprised when they tested positive because they felt fine, but they have a really great T cell response. And that's actually T cells being so important here, or why younger people have done so much better, because T cells decline with age. And basically after age 50, they really start to decline. So that's the reason why more older people get sick. And there's a lot of other reasons too, because they have other health problems. The second major aspect of the immune system involved here is our ability to make antibodies. So that's a more specialized response. And B cells recognize things that are foreign, but what they try to do is manufacture an exact match to latch on to that protein, for example, that spike protein on the surface of the virus, make an antibody so that if the body ever sees it again, boom, it'll respond to it, it latches onto it, and then that virus is pulled into a big cell that's called a macrophage, that's just the garbage can for bad things, in this case, the virus. So you really want to have both of those responses. And by and large, the vaccines that are out there now are very good at generating the antibody response. They're not as strong at getting a T cell response, which might be a little better for preventing transmission, but they're still really great vaccines. I think there's about 3 of them now, of course, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. As you know, there's others coming along, but those top 3 in our country really are good. And I think one of the other questions people often have is they're a little like, wow, these vaccines were developed so quickly. Should we worry about that? Well, here's the really good news about that. The methods to make the vaccines were really well established. All they had to do is plug in that little spike protein sequence to it, and they were ready to go and start testing it. And so the one thing that was good about this virus is that little protein on the surface. The body really likes to make antibodies to it. It sees it and just goes, that is all wrong. We're making an antibody to it. So they just plugged that in and they started testing it. And another thing that facilitated the speed of this is when you develop a vaccine, well, you have to test it in a lot of people who are at risk for getting the disease or condition. It's unethical to actually infect them deliberately. You can't do that. But of course, since this was everywhere, it was fairly easy to get 30,000 people that were very likely to be exposed to this virus. And also because you would get sick so quickly with it if you weren't vaccinated, they were able to get the results in a matter of months. And that's a lot of samples, is what we call them, but subjects, 30,000 people. So the data was really good. And of course, along with that, they always look at safety. And the safety data also looked really good. So there was a few things that were really fortunate there. These companies were they were dedicated, they were ready to go with how to produce these vaccines. And because there were so many people being exposed to it, it was really easy and rapidly tested. So you all should feel pretty good about that. And I think I'm going to stop for a minute right now to see if you have any questions.
I have a whole bunch. So my gosh, where do I even start? So my first question to you is, why is the vaccine in two parts? Why are there two parts to it?
Oh, that's a really great question. Because our body actually sees foreign proteins all the time, and we'll get an antibody response, but it can't, the body's immune system can't waste all its energy manufacturing antibodies for something that it never sees again. So naturally, what would happen is on the second exposure, it sends a signal to the immune system that says, oh, you know what? This is going to be a recurring threat. Now we're going to really ramp up antibody production. So the first shot we get from the vaccine is called the prime. It's the first, information given to the immune system that this is foreign, and it makes a few cells that are making the antibody. And then when you get the second one, the boost, it goes, hello, and it's called clonal expansion. It starts to make a lot of the B memory cells that make the antibodies. So now your antibodies levels are going to remain high. I will say they go up higher, they stay high for, it looks like about 6 to 8 months, but we may also need, if this virus stays around, we might also need boosters annually or every 5 years, because again, without re-exposure, those antibodies are going to start to drop down again. But as you know, we get, in most people over 50, it's recommended they get a flu shot every year. So hopefully it will just be like that. Or if we're really lucky, it'll be so effective that this virus dies out. Sometimes they do. Sometimes viruses do disappear, and then we don't have to have the annual booster.
Why are people getting more sick or sick on the second one versus the first one? Is that because of
it's the increased immune response. Those symptoms, we think we have the flu, body aches, fever. That's what the system does. When the immune system ramps up, it performs better at a higher temperature. So the whole core temperature goes up. Cells swarm to the site of injection, which I think is in the arm. Well, I know it's in the arm. And so you get really sore. So it's a matter of scale. The first time the response was small. The second time the response was much better because it elicited this memory response. And then all the troops came in. So that's why the people get a little sicker after the boost rather than the prime.
I have a question. So the Johnson & Johnson one is one shot.
Right. Oh, that's delivered in what we call a platform. So how do we get that little spike protein into the body? Moderna and Pfizer just use a little code for the protein called mRNA, almost by itself. And they code it with something and it goes in and it only makes that protein for a very short period of time. Maybe about, I think it's 4 days to a week. And then it stops making it, cells stop making it. So it needs to be revisited. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is delivered actually in a disabled kind of a shell of a virus called an adenovirus. It's an ordinary cold virus, but they've taken out all the parts of it that make it act like a virus and getting you sick. But what it can do, when it's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, is it can keep making that little spike protein for 3 to 4 weeks. So it acts as its own boost. It's both initiates a response, and then because it persists within those weeks, it ramps up without the need for the boost.
So you would say they're equal? Because I've heard from several people, like the Johnson & Johnson one it's only one shot, so it's not as, I guess you would say, potent or effective.
It has a slightly lower, you can't be not plus 90% from Moderna and Pfizer. That's just excellent in the vaccine world, just excellent. And Johnson & Johnson's is a little lower, but they did test if that could be improved by having the boost, and it didn't improve it. But I think their 85% or greater is still excellent.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that can lead to one vaccine numbers looking better than another. It depends on, which 30 to 40,000 people they tested in and when, against what strain of the virus. And also there are some things they do to modify the protein that can increase immune responses. Those are called adjuvants. And they're proprietary, which means the companies won't say what they are. And I know that Pfizer uses one that's proprietary, and that's why theirs is so good. Luckily, overall, in the world of science around COVID-19, people have been very forthcoming with information to help fight this virus. But there are still a few things, and in this case about vaccine design, that they don't share. So yeah, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
What do you say to people, Patricia, that think there's all kinds of other things in the vaccine? The conspiracy theorists that say, I'm not getting that. I know a lot of people like this. I'm not getting that because we're getting more than what's going to combat, COVID-19, and we're having things put into our bodies that are going to make us
change our DNA.
I mean, I've heard it all from so many people. So how do you address that?
Well, I can't address something that isn't true. You can't prove a falsehood. But I will say none of these vaccines can incorporate in our DNA. They're just not capable of doing that. In fact, after a while, they disappear altogether. Now, this is not what you're talking about, but for example, when I described Pfizer and Moderna, it's a piece of mRNA and they have to protect it with this coating. Some people do have an allergic reaction to that coating that protects it. It's rare, but as you know, you've heard about it. Now, that's not the other odd things that you're describing. But of course, there's a platform for how all these vaccines are delivered. I will say, I know this to be true in general, if we're well vaccinated, we have a better immune system overall because our immune system is being challenged in a safe way. What happens when I had a colleague, not a biologist, say, well, you get better immunity from the real infection. And I said, well, you don't, because most viruses have a way of circumventing your immune system. That's why you got infected. And so you get enough of an immune response to overcome the disease, but you're going to get the flu again next year because you're really not fully protected. Whereas these vaccines give you a much higher level of protection. And every time you get vaccinated, you kind of get toned again. Your immune system gets practice again. As a separate thing, repeated illness damages tissues. It damages the protection between our main system and our brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier. But constant infection of our teeth or our fingernails, it starts to really tatter the body over time and makes you more prone to infection. So in fact, I would say there's an overall benefit to vaccination, even compared to not getting vaccinated. However, I do really understand vaccination is a personal choice, as is all medical treatment. I mean, some people will decline medical treatment for a variety of reasons, and they should be allowed to do so. I don't like them doing so and spreading false ideas about it, but I do understand they have a right to choose. With some exceptions, I believe in the armed forces, you are required to get vaccinated against a panel of different things for a variety of reasons.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Have you heard of VAERS? Do you know what VAERS is?
No. Is it an acronym?
Yes, for vaccine adverse reactions. So there's a whole database. The CDC has it. And then there's also something called openvaers.com, which takes that information and it puts it into an easy way to get it. When you go through the CDC, you kind of have to go through a couple of steps to go and get to the information you want, but this makes it easy. It's an easier platform. It might be something that people want to look at if they want to see about the adverse reactions.
Yeah. As with all medical treatment, there are adverse reactions. We have a vaccine in our company. It's in early development, but some people, well, it's just like with the flu vaccine. I get the flu vaccine every year. Nothing happens. And I have friends who they feel like really bad for 2 days. So yeah, that's another thing one wants to keep in mind. If you often have a bad reaction to any kind of vaccine, it could be those other components in what they call the vehicle that you react badly to, and you really have to be cautious about. Yeah, I think it's good to always look into the incidence of the adverse reactions to any medication, far beyond vaccines as well. And then how you fit in there, whether you're likely to suffer from that side effect. Almost all of them have side effects.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is it okay?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I want to say I'm very honored to have you, Dr. Spilman, to speak to our group. And thank you, Susan, for inviting your sister. I'm an alumni from UCLA also. I majored in biochemistry over there. And one of my teachers was Dr. Henry Hildgard. He was a great immunologist. But I was going to ask you, what is the likelihood of having to take the vaccine next year or the following year to keep our immune primed for this kind of virus?
Okay, I can't really predict the epidemiology of this disease. This will be my educated guess. A large part of the world is not getting vaccinated and the virus is everywhere. So it's going to keep circulating around. So, and because these people, a lot of people are only getting vaccinated just now, we won't really know how long the antibodies last for about a year. And so I guess we'll have to see, but yes, I think it's likely for a while, we will probably have to get boosted again about every year. I would guess that that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Patricia, talk a little bit about the whole mask wearing thing, because there certainly are the maskers versus the non-maskers. And, people will say, well, I'm not going to get sick. And if I do, it's my own problem, but I'm not going to wear a mask. And if you think you're going to get sick, you wear a mask. Can you explain to us why it's important for everybody to wear masks, at least for a period of time until this is more under control? And it's certainly getting more under control. Can you maybe explain that, why that's important?
Oh, well, it's a respiratory disease, and it does seem like the major route of transmission now is through breathing. So even if you're not worried about getting infected, like I said, you can be very infected and spreading this virus without even knowing it. And in my opinion, one should care about infecting other people. And then of course, another person has a mask, and they are both protecting themselves and protecting others. And it's just that much more helpful if both people have masks on, because if one who routinely doesn't wear a mask, of course, they're more likely to be infected. They're spreading it around. And I don't know about you, I'm trying to get good masks, but they're not that great. And so there's still a risk. So it greatly lowers the risk, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion. I feel like if everybody had been very good about the mask wearing, we would not have been locked down nearly long enough. And if the local government of Wuhan had immediately required everybody wear masks, it may not have gotten out of there. It's just the best sort of easy way, while we still get to go around and do things, to stop something. But I do also understand the masks can be uncomfortable, and some people have an emotional response to it because they feel they can't breathe well. And that, combined with, I think, as we all know, the emotional pressure of being locked down during the pandemic, I think has led a lot to this sort of rebellion against it, even though I think most people would say logically it makes sense. It is controversial, so it's something that I don't want to get too into. But for me, for my personal decision, I've devoted my life to try to find treatments for diseases. So the first thing I'm going to do is to want to protect other people, even before protecting myself. I would almost have the opposite view. If there was a chance I could hurt somebody, I wouldn't take it. I would wear a mask. And I do wish there was more talk about freedom being the freedom to really help each other and be kind to each other and do what we can for each other. and a little less a tone of freedom always being just about the self. But that's political, so I don't want to get,
Yeah.
I do understand though, a little micro rebellion.
Yeah.
I felt it.
There's someone that has a question, Navee.
This is Kathy Hagan, and I'm due to have my second shot tomorrow morning, actually. Now, after having both shots or having Johnson's single shot, I think they're still recommending that you wear masks. What are your thoughts on after you've been the 2 weeks and masking and not masking after that time frame?
Now, that's not my area of expertise, so all I'll do is refer as the rest of you can too. But I think they're starting to ease up on that because there was a little discordance in the CDC and other groups. And some say now you really can go without the mask, especially around other people who have been vaccinated. That's sort of the key caveat there, because they don't have all the data in about if the major vaccines prevent transmission. They certainly prevent illness and hospitalization, but do they prevent transmission? And it would be terrible to find out that you're fully vaccinated, you're good, but for 2 days you were transmitting the virus to somebody that wasn't protected. We're just waiting for a little more data to come in. I, though, am very optimistic that once we have a lot of people vaccinated, we'll start seeing the masks disappear. I mean, in part because we're ready for that, and the risk will be much, much lower. And I think we'll be.
My understanding also is that I can still get the virus, even after having both shots and the waiting period and all that kind of stuff. That's true, correct?
That's right. That's right. It can still enter the body, still latches onto the cells, but the response to it is so fast that you don't get sick. And by sick, I mean symptomatic. But we actually, if a lot of you don't get sick very often, that happens all the time. I know, I sort of joke to my husband, he gets about 3 colds a year, and I maybe get one every 2 years. Well, I'm still getting the cold. My immune system, though, is that much better. So I'm not symptomatic. It wasn't that I wasn't exposed to it and it didn't start. I just cleared it much faster than he did. But still, I think transmission is going to be much lower. A lot of people are going to be vaccinated. It will feel like then people who are not vaccinated maybe will have to take more personal precautions. But anyway, I do expect the masks to start disappearing over the next 6 months. And I think there's a lot of pressure for that to happen as well. Although personally, I have a collection of beautiful masks that I match both my handbags and my clothes.
That's how they made money off all this, the mask people and the hand sanitizers.
Oh, no.
Oh, the hand sanitizer people. Yeah. Oh, but a lot of homemade masks. That was kind of cute.
Yeah.
Hey, I wouldn't mind, by the way, seeing people who have active colds and flu in the future wear a mask. I would have appreciated that.
Well, and maybe we learned that from all of this, that now that we're used to wearing masks, our society in America didn't commonly wear masks. It would be very rare if we ever saw one on someone. And I know if I would see someone out there wherever wearing a mask, my first thought was that maybe they were going through chemotherapy or something like that, and they wanted to protect themselves about, whatever was going on out there. But now that we're all really accustomed to wearing masks, I think we'll be more readily, just aware of it, number one, but more likely to put on the mask if we sense that other things are going on out there. It's cold and flu season. We might want to start wearing one so we don't get it, right? Or if we feel something coming on and we need to go about our life, then we need to put one on. So I think there's some good that's come out of that. And also just all the sanitation measures that we take now that we weren't paying attention to before, washing our hands and using hand sanitizer and cleaning surfaces that, not that you have to be obsessed with cleaning off every shopping cart again, maybe down the road, but we've just, I think, learned more about sanitation in general.
Hey, actually, I'll say, I think the cleaning of the shopping cart handle is one of the best things. Oh, yeah, all those like sick kids and all the goo on the handle, and we were all just grabbing it and then
That's
scratching
true,
our
that's true.
faces.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think I'll wear a face mask on an airplane most of the time. I think I've gotten sick on airplanes before.
I know I have. But
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a good idea just to continue that practice down the road.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that'll be kind of a good thing that comes out
I
of
have a
it.
quick question about children. So my niece has asthma, and I'm wondering, like, if with the asthma, like if kids have some underlying conditions, are they going to get vaccinated at some point, or do you have any ideas of that?
Yeah, they're testing the vaccine in children now. And along with the reason why, first of all, I have to say, first and foremost, when this was a novel virus and we didn't know, I know it's been horrible, but I am so glad that it wasn't lethal to children. Because, there've been a lot of viruses historically that were particularly deadly for children. Polio, smallpox. I mean, that just would have been horrendous. But not only do children have really strong T cell response and good immune system, they have far lower amount of that angiotensin converting enzyme on their cell surface. That really doesn't come in until early adulthood. So they're not as easy to infect, but nonetheless, there are children with underlying conditions that even if they get a little bit of the virus, it's very dangerous for them. So they are currently testing at least 2 of the vaccines in children now to make sure they're safe, because they are, as with all medication, just because it's okay, let's say for an adult male, doesn't mean it's okay either, for a woman or a child or an elderly person, et cetera. So they're testing it in the children. And then there will be an option for children at risk to get vaccinated. Yeah,
Pregnant
very good
women.
question.
I have a daughter who's 9 weeks pregnant now, and unfortunately, she's a nurse at the children's hospital in Reno right now, emergency room nurse for children. So I worry about her. What do they say about pregnant women?
By and large, pregnancy, or if you're going to try to get pregnant, excludes you from the clinical trial. So I think they don't have a lot of data on it yet. I think what that data will come in later with vaccinated people who, vaccinated now as part of medical treatment, not as a clinical trial. And we'll just see what the data is, especially with pregnant women. The immune system does change. So I think I certainly wouldn't recommend necessarily a pregnant person get vaccinated until the data came in.
Yeah.
I would just be very cautious, the mask wearing and exposure. We just don't know yet. We don't know yet.
Thank you.
Dr. Spilman, you mentioned about the virus affecting angiotensin, I guess 1 and 2, right?
Just 2, ACE2.
Yeah. So when you have high blood pressure, you take Lipitor, so we'll go from angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. But will this virus affect people that high blood pressure should really be taking the vaccine, since people with blood pressure has angiotensin 2, which is elevating the blood pressure?
Oh, remember, the vaccine isn't the virus. It doesn't attack. The vaccine doesn't have anything to do with attaching to ACE2. That's the virus itself.
Right. So people that are exposed to the virus might, if they have high blood pressure, they should be really taking this vaccine, right?
Right. That's right. In fact, people with high blood pressure are at the greatest risk for being ill. Sometimes they just naturally have higher ACE2, or that system is out of balance, and that puts them at great risk. So yeah, I would, if I was a physician, I had a patient with high blood pressure, I definitely would tell them to get vaccinated, as long as they didn't have a history of reactions to vaccines or other medications, taking in the whole picture. Right. As we do. But you're absolutely right. The angiotensin system is involved in blood pressure. So in fact, as an aside, one of the things that's so deadly about it is when the virus really takes over in a very ill person and spreads throughout the body and starts binding to the ACE2, it prevents it from doing its normal function in the body. And that's why they get so sick, and it can rapidly lead to death.
Mm.
I learned so much about it in the last year.
Thank you.
Besides blood pressure, what are some of the other high risk factors, health factors for people?
Well, diabetes, of course, asthma, advanced age, a compromised immune system, which is not uncommon, and not uncommon as people age, because blood pressure can change if you're obesity. Smoking also increases blood pressure, so smokers are more at risk. And they are actually, I think, have had access to the vaccine. People with these conditions have access to the vaccine sooner than the rest of us. But basically, it kind of all kind of focuses down on that one molecule, our natural molecule on our cells, the ACE2 molecule, and what state that's in an individual.
Okay.
Question.
Hi.
Hi. So again, the conspiracy theories that go running around rampant, but I have always, this has been my story and I'm sticking to it. They have always said that O negative blood is less likely to be susceptible to the virus. Is that true?
I don't know about that exactly, but it is not. It would not be unusual. When they say O negative, that is actually a protein on the surface of your blood cells, and it's involved in immune responses. It's not some other thing about the body that has nothing to do with immune response. It does. So I absolutely can see how blood type, depending on your blood type, that you might be more or less susceptible to increased infection. And that's not a non-biological concept, because all these things we hear about, A negative, O negative, and blood types, that all they are other proteins on the surface of the cells of our blood. And the cells in our blood are what are integrally involved in our immune response. And I can always look up, I could look at some, scientifically reviewed papers afterwards, blood type and susceptibility. I could see where that would be a really easy study to run, because in certain places, so many people have been infected. It's pretty easy to get blood types. And then you just start doing the statistics. So yeah, I don't know that particular specific answer, but that's not a crazy one. I think there's some real biology behind that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I have a question.
What's that?
Is it normal, or have you seen anybody that they take the Pfizer, both vaccines, and no symptoms? Like some people say they get sick or feel weird, but I took mine on Monday and I haven't had any symptoms. Nobody believes me. I had a second vaccine.
You were breaking up a little bit. Were you asking, is it unusual that different people have different responses?
Yeah, I took my second vaccine on Monday and no symptoms whatsoever.
I know. No, it is not unusual at all for people to have very different responses in how they feel after taking a vaccine. I will say, although it's a very low risk, those responses, fever or aches or whatever, is your immune system working. And a lot of people have the inclination to take a lot of ibuprofen or something like that. And those are non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. They actually dampen the immune response. So if you take a lot of them right after you got a vaccine, you're actually undermining what it is the vaccine is supposed to do. Now, these vaccines are so effective, because I looked this up, that the effect taking a lot of, ibuprofen, just like Advil or even Tylenol, it does very little to hurt the immune response, but it does reduce it a little bit. And historically, that's been found. But, one has to make a choice. If you're in terrible discomfort after the vaccine, and maybe taking a couple ibuprofen would help, I think it's fairly harmless. But I'm like you, when I get a flu vaccine, I haven't qualified for the COVID vaccine yet, but when I get a flu vaccine, I can't even tell. And other people, they can't lift their arm. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I don't know why, I'm just
How do
fine.
people multivitamins or vitamin D?
Well, of course, vitamins alone aren't going to protect you from a major illness, but overall health, including having good levels of vitamin D and vitamin C are always good for our immune system. So what I would say is, if you want to lower your risk for this and any other disease, make sure you have good nutrition and you have good vitamin levels. Some people don't process vitamins very well, and they're surprised to find out they actually have low vitamin C or low E or low D, even though they eat well, and they might want to take a supplement. It's not a bad idea. It's part of overall health and a really good immune system.
Isn't it true that most people are low on vitamin D or D3? They always ask.
As I understand it, these days people are lower on D and D3 because we wear sunscreen and we're not outside as much. So it can't hurt to take a supplement. I'm not really promoting that kind of, supplements. I don't want to do that. But I've heard that as well. And vitamin D is, it's just great for you overall, not just fighting off disease, but for cognitive function and all kinds of bodily functions. So I think if you personally wear a lot of sunscreen or always wearing long sleeves when you're outside, or you never get outside, take some vitamin D. I wish we could more commonly, for example, when we go in for an annual physical, get our vitamin levels measured. Quite often you have to pay more for that, which maybe if you can afford it, you should do. But I think it should be routine.
Yeah.
As part of that annual exam.
When you do get your vaccine, do you have a preference of which one you're going to get?
I'll go for any of them. Well, and that's because, sure, Pfizer, Moderna, 90% or higher, Johnson & Johnson a little lower. That percentage difference is still people who are more at risk. And remember, the population they used for the clinical trial were people who are at high risk for being exposed. Because if you weren't going to go outside and be exposed, you're not really testing the vaccine. So for example, my older sister wanted to be in the trial, and when they did a profile of they're like, you're never going to be exposed. You're hiding in your house. You're not coming out. We won't know if the vaccine worked. It'll look good, but we actually want people who are frontline workers or delivery people, and they're out there. So there's still higher risk. And again, I don't know if there were significant population differences in the groups in which these different vaccines were treated, but the efficacy level of Johnson & Johnson, it's really great. Yes, I will take whatever they give me.
Vanessa, it looks like you've been wanting to speak, and then Ginger after Vanessa.
I have a question. So I was filling out to get an appointment to get the vaccine. And one of the questions were if you have a bleeding disorder. So I have two boys that do have a bleeding disorder. They have hemophilia A. So my question was, why is that a question to get the vaccine?
I don't want to say specifically, because I think that's a general question that they might be asking to find out what the bleeding disorder is. And it simply must be that there's a higher chance of adverse reaction to a vaccine if you have a bleeding disorder. But I don't know the biology behind it. So I don't want to misspeak or misrepresent on that. But obviously it does involve, clotting factor for your sons, clotting factors in the blood. No, I don't want to speculate. It's, there's probably a really good reason behind it. I might look into that after this call today. Sorry that I don't know the exact answer to that.
Okay.
Ginger?
I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about the WHO saying on the 20th of March, I believe it was January 20th rather, sorry. They had said that the PCR test was flawed, and that if these labs were running the PCR test at anything 35 cycles or above, that the positives were false positives. So that we had a lot of false positives for that reason.
Sorry, of this year? January 20th of this year?
Yes, when Biden was inaugurated, yes.
Well, I will say this, I can't you know, I don't run PCR tests, it's not my area of expertise, but I do know what the polymerase chain reaction is. And the more cycles you go, you're amplifying. And the more cycles you go, the more you amplify. So if you had very little of something and you hyper amplify it, I can see where it would come up finally as a positive, because anything in there that kind of is giving a false signal, but that could possibly be amplified, now it's going to show up. So I'm going to go with, I could see there's, with all assays, and the PCR assay here is an assay, there are false positives and there are false negatives. And if you get them, you do exactly kind of what you're describing. They look across the method. And like you said, in this case, the cycles of amplification, they were too high. This was associated with false positives. So I could see that. I could see that, definitely. They probably looked into that. It sounds legit. Yeah, it sounds legit. But again, I don't know. I didn't know anything about what the World Health Organization said on that or anything.
You can Google it, it's on there. And then also, what do you think about the flu cases dropping 98% per CDC?
Right, because we were all locked in. Well, I'll tell you, my husband had the healthiest year ever. I mean, he didn't get anything. He didn't get a cold or flu. We were all, yeah. So that's all. The same routes that flu travels are the routes that COVID travels. And since we basically were sealing them off, that was one of the few highlights of the year. It was like, oh, well, we also didn't get flu or colds. But of course, you know, we're going to be out there again. And it's too bad, you know, flu, we've had, you know, flu changes so fast. We have to get a vaccine every year. And the cold viruses, they just don't have something really good on their surface to make a vaccine against. There's just nothing, and the HIV is like that. And of course, the HIV, there's medications for it, but it's been almost impossible to make a vaccine because there's really nothing on the surface of the virus that the immune system goes, I'm going to make an antibody against that. So at least with how horrible this has been, the one thing this virus had was that protein on the surface that is so easy to make antibodies against.
Interesting.
Yeah, lower flu. Oh, well, there's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, such interesting information.
Yeah.
So,
Jan, it looks like Jan has a question.
So this, I'm not trying to be argumentative or anything. I don't really have a real opinion about it. But so on the flu, you think that we're just not getting the flu, or are they just counting those as COVID?
Oh, no, they do the test.
They
do the, first of all, of course, that's not my area at all. I didn't, you know, I'm not involved in testing or epidemiology or, you know, I'm a immunologist, it's not my area. No, I think you can imagine that if we're wearing masks and we're cleaning our hands and avoiding people, we're just going to be less likely to transmit the flu. Were there probably some cases of other illnesses that might have been counted as COVID? Maybe, but then there's probably people who died of unknown causes that were exacerbated by COVID. One of the things they basically do is they look also at the number of deaths above normal. And here it's been a pretty good match. So when they say 500,000 Americans, they also look at how many people died, you know, in a year over the last 10 years. And the numbers line up. But in the end, unfortunately, exactly who died of what, while it's important, you know, there's going to be some human error in it, both directions. It was new. The assays were new. The different types of it, the antigen assay, the PCR assay were new. So there's always going to be a little wobble in it, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you say, human error.
Richard has a question, and then we have some stuff on the chat box as well. Richard, go ahead. You're muted, Richard.
All right, there we go. Quick question on masks. Some studies I've had been looking at, because all of our products that we use for personal protective equipment, which is masks, are typically tested by various companies. And the ones I have read were really saying that they cannot provide any protection because a biological virus is so small of a particle that there is no way, shape, or form even an N95 type mask can provide any protection. Do you have any ideas on that? Because that's what we're reading in the testing of these products.
I would have to see what you're reading, because any mechanical barrier is going to provide some protection. Now, I could believe that it might say it can't provide 100% protection, and especially our little homemade masks. But it does help a little bit. And then, as you know, we were instructed to double mask, basically for that very reason, before the vaccines came out. I would just be surprised a really rigorous scientific report would say that no mask can possibly provide any protection. That seems a little.
I'm still in this conference space.
Exaggerated.
Yeah, they were just saying that the virus particle is so severely small compared to the openings through cloth and N95.
Oh, there's escapees. Okay, that I agree with, of course. I mean, I have like a gap here and there, it's escaping. This is a big thing though, very important. Viral load. Okay, there's the big cloud and there's moisture in our breath. So we're blowing out into the mask. At least a lot of it is getting trapped here in the mask. Sure, some's escaping, but the difference between, if you see this big cloud coming out, you don't see it, it's invisible, and you're breathing it in, viral load, compared to a little bit, you know, like in the old cartoons where it's like that little bit of smoke. That's the difference between having, you know, two guys coming over the castle walls with grappling hooks and having an army of 10,000 coming in through the front gates. Your immune system has a shot at it. If it's a lower viral load, they're like, let's get on this, T cells, it's out of here. If you get a big load, which is what happened early in the disease when people just didn't know how to protect themselves, it all happens so fast that it's almost impossible. I'll agree in general, a lot of our masks aren't really good. None of them do 100% protection, but they do provide some protection, and it's better than getting, you know, the full load in the face. And that's the distancing as well, you know, and that's supposed to be a combination of the mask and the distancing. As an aside, a friend of mine said, I agree with her. She goes, I don't know why they call it social distancing. It's physical distancing, right? We've been socializing on Zoom. We hopefully not had to, we've had socialization. It's physical distancing. But yeah, anyway, so the combination of at least a pretty good mask. I got rid of the ones I thought were really bad that I could tell that were just useless.
Yeah.
And distancing, and the other person having their best effort at a mask on. You know, we're trying to lower the incidence. It's certainly not perfect.
Okay, there's some questions in the chat box, Patricia. The first one is, do you recommend one vaccine over the other ones?
No, again, like all three of them, unless you're known to have an allergic reaction that may make one of them less appropriate for you. And that's something somebody has to know their own personal history and talk to their physician. Because again, the RNA vaccines are coded with something that as I understand it, people who have allergies to eggs and some similar things may react to. Yeah, they don't,
and then
it's not completely understood.
And then the next question is Johnson vaccines mostly for people who have had the virus?
Oh, no, not necessarily. That's an interesting question. Like, does it make a better booster for somebody who's been infected? Well, I can see this. Since it's going to act as a booster, if you've already been infected, why get another 2 shots? If just for convenience sake, just get one. I can see that, but I haven't actually heard that you necessarily have to pick one over another if you've previously been infected. That's an interesting question.
And then Ginger, share the website. So if you want more information, if you have allergic reactions to the vaccine, it's openvirus.com. And then Adam saying, if so many people are getting COVID, wouldn't the same people get the flu too? So as much cases as we have as COVID, wouldn't it be as the flu as well?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So he says, if so many people were getting COVID, wouldn't people be getting the flu too?
Oh, they did when, yeah, the flu went around last year before we had shut down. Sure, as it always does. Yeah, so I had to see, no, yeah. So you're talking about during the last year of the pandemic. The COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is highly transmissible. And of course, flu went down, but it didn't disappear. So yeah, people got the flu too. Of course.
And then the last question is it safe for someone who has an autoimmune disorder, limb disease, to be vaccinated?
I'm not going to answer that. They have to talk to their physician. I'd have to know exactly what the autoimmune disorder is and what cells are involved. That's interesting. It does suggest they have a hyperactive immune system that doesn't recognize the right targets. So I cannot give that kind of medical advice, but they should certainly
It
talk
says
to
the
their
limb
physician.
disease.
Lyme
What's
disease.
that?
Lyme disease.
I have no idea whether somebody with Lyme disease should get the vaccine or not. Definitely outside of my area of expertise.
I'm curious, people who have had COVID and recovered nicely, then get the shots, tend to get pretty sick for a few days. Is that a common thing that you're seeing, and if so, why?
That makes sense as well. I mean, they got the real stimulation of their immune system. So they have immune memory cells. So when they get the vaccine, it's a big memory. Those cells are there and they're ready to go. And it's like a broader immunity. So it's a bigger response. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. All of those symptoms that we associate, the bad ones, with getting vaccinated are at a greater scale if you've had a previous exposure, either from a vaccine or from the disease itself.
If we've heard a lot of people have tested positive for COVID, but never really got sick, are they going to feel as bad once they get the shots also, like the people who have the symptoms of COVID, or do you not know?
I'm just going to guess. On this. If they were asymptomatic, they probably had a better T cell response, and maybe the antibodies weren't as important. So they may not get as sick when they get a vaccine because they don't have all the memory B cells that are going to go, whew, let's make a ton of antibodies right now and fire up the temperature, and the muscle gets stored and the cells are going to swarm. They might have a little less of that. But gosh, everybody's so individual for a lot of other reasons. I think maybe what you're speaking to is maybe there's a little bit of a fear of the feeling bad after the vaccine. Is that?
Yeah, I've had some people say they don't want to get the vaccine because they've had COVID and they figure they're protected, and they keep hearing that, well, I don't want to get sick again because I heard that people get sick after they
Well, of course, when you say sick in response to a vaccine, of course you have symptoms that make you feel bad, but you're not sick in the sense you're not infected with anything, and it's not damaging your tissue, et cetera, and it's not going to spread and get worse. So sick kind of mean, but I meet a lot of people who probably their number one reason for not getting any vaccine is they don't feel good for 2 days afterwards. And that's very common. I understand that. Who wants to sign up for that? It's something that people consider. I understand that. I'd be willing to tolerate it to protect myself from something far worse, but that's such a personal decision. They could, from time to time, if their physician's willing to do it, have their antibody levels tested to see if they're still protected. But I would actually say somebody who's survived, a lot of people are going to get vaccinated. This is going to get a lot better. So maybe if somebody's previously been infected, has a lot of concern, maybe they could feel a little better about waiting to get the vaccine if they're still considering it.
Yeah, I just hear that from different people, and I'm just kind of curious if, okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.
I had a question. I haven't really researched it or looked into it, but I've kind of heard that, it may be that it'll be required for you to have the vaccines to travel. Have you heard?
Oh, yeah, that's,
about
that would be the decision of the government, of airlines, so I certainly have no idea. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I know.
I haven't heard that coming down.
I know if Hawaii required me to be vaccinated to travel, I would get vaccinated. They're very strict.
Yeah, yeah.
If I have to get boiled before I come in, I'll do it. Dying
too.
on vacation. Yeah. Anyway, I'd say, but you guys could just, could all have an opinion on this. I could see where, yeah, it's probably some airlines for a while might do that.
Yeah.
Countries like New Zealand. My son lives in New Zealand. He can't get out. I can't go visit. They've sealed us off. Of course, consequently, they have no cases. Right? Yeah.
Their rates of COVID are much lower, aren't they?
No, they're almost zero, if not zero. They'll have like one case too. And so consequently, it's been business as usual because they did a month of hard lockdown, 100% lockdown, I think in March or April. And then that was it. Of course, they don't let people in. I mean, it only works maybe for a small country like New Zealand.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've been able to run around. No cases.
I just noticed that Laura posted a question. Do you know if you have sulfa drug allergies, if the vaccine coating will impact the reaction? I just wanted to respond. I am allergic severely to sulfa and penicillins. I had the first shot and I had almost no reaction. Arms just a little bit sore, but I was fine.
I think you're right.
Which one did you take?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that, but you've got some good answers here. Yeah, you got at least one, what do you call that? What we call an N number, an N of one study of allergies and vaccinations.
Jan was shaking her head also, right, Jan?
Yes, I'm allergic to sulfa and penicillin drugs. And so I was going to ask that very question. What's in it? How do we know what's in the vaccine?
I just didn't know if that coating that it has could.
Yeah,
that was
it's like almost like an albumin coating, which is more of a protein coating, whereas sulfa and penicillin, those are chemicals, or what we call in the business small molecules. So they are very different. But then the other aspect is some people will get allergic reaction to a broad range of things, and that's also a flag for when considering, we probably all have friends that are allergic to a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot to be learned about allergy.
Yeah.
Something to consider.
And how would a person know, or is there a way to know if you would be allergic to the coatings ahead of time, or you just don't know until you have
other than a history of allergy to some of the, of course, already now that more and more people are getting vaccinated, in the rare case they get an allergic reaction, they take that patient history, they add it into a database, they start crunching it to see where are the associations. So we'll start to know more and more. And I think if one is real concerned, reliable source for that information, your physician, unless you feel like your physician, this is all new for physicians as well, and they may not know. So, it might be something you have to look into yourself or call a health department, et cetera.
Okay, good.
So are many people getting vaccinated in Central Valley? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I got vaccinated yesterday.
Yeah.
It was really easy. I think they're vaccinating anybody in our area. You just go down to Walgreens and have an appointment online.
Not here. I could have gone to UCLA to get vaccinated, but I didn't want to go down to Southern California because it was the hot zone there for a while. It was really, the lab I'm associated with there, 3 people got sick. It shut down the lab. And it's so funny, 3 of them, 1 barely sick, 1 all the taste and smell, and the 3rd she was a young woman. She had to quit and has not come back. She got all the secondary symptoms where she was really sick for 2 weeks and she could never think clearly again. So even after 2 months, she couldn't do her job.
Oh, that's sad.
She couldn't do calculations. It's very.
Patricia, I have a question. Why should we trust these vaccines that were developed in less than a year if usually vaccines take many years, many trials to get to this point? And these vaccines, I mean, we have 3 different companies that roll out vaccines in less than a year, when in reality, I mean, vaccines usually take years to develop. Can you answer a little bit of that?
Well, I did already, as you know, but I think they joined later. They probably joined later.
Can you be a little bit more specific? Because I know
I
there's
can.
a lot of us on this.
I'll keep it really simple. The methods for the platform for the vaccines were already well developed, number one. Number two, this virus, thank goodness, had a really easy target, the spike protein on the surface, highly antigenic. The things that have slowed down vaccine development is they're trying to find something on the surface of the virus or other entity to target, and they don't have a good target. This had a great target. Highly antigenic is what it's called. Easy to make antibodies to, the spike protein. So platform and exposure of the population so that you can test the efficacy, which is how well it works, of the vaccine. Typically, what takes a long time is that you vaccinate people against papillomavirus or something else, and you wait for them to naturally get exposed. Well, a lot of these infections are rare and hard to come by, but you still need thousands of subjects and enough data so that you believe it. Well, we easily had tens of thousands of people being exposed. It was a very easy, what we call a readout. Did you get sick, which means symptomatic? Were you hospitalized? It was very easy. So within 4 months of them starting what's called phase 3, they had enough really good data to show it was safe, it worked, it's on a platform that was safe, and a highly antigenic target, the spike protein. And so what I'll say is a little bit on the unfortunate side, the widespread of this virus made it easy to test its efficacy. People were going to get exposed, and fast, and a lot of them. And other than that, it was existing technology and a really, really good target.
Good.
Thank you. And then another part of that question, I know a lot of people are waiting for maybe a year to get actually vaccinated because they want to see how the first group of people react to it. What are your thoughts on that, of being vaccinated now or waiting, a year or 6 months from now?
Oh, well, that's a personal choice. So I can't really speak to personal choices, but I do understand the feeling about that. I'm all for people having their personal choice in that regard. My personal choice is, I can't get vaccinated fast enough, but I really do understand it deeply, exactly what they are. Exactly. I mean, I've had to, in part of my job, had to read all of their scientific papers that are very rigorously peer reviewed and shared in the most prestigious medical journals in the world. The Journal of the American Medical Association, Nature, Science. I could go on and on. I feel really good about it, but I completely understand that caution of let's wait and see how everybody else does. So they should, kind of go with what they feel and then review it every now and then. Maybe they've said 6 months or a year, and they might feel differently in 3 months. Certainly, there's a lot of people who want to get vaccinated. So the people here and there who for their own reasons, and there are good reasons, want to wait. It's okay. You should go with their feelings on some of that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one quick question.
Richard?
Kerry Mullis, he's the biochemist that invented the PCR test. He recently passed away in 2019, so we can't really go back and ask him, but He's had many video interviews where he says his PCR test cannot be used for diagnosing, but yet we're using it to diagnose whether we have COVID or not. So any ideas on how we're actually identifying it, if we're basing it on the PCR test, and how do we know that anybody actually has it?
Oh, well, there are several assays, and we look for both evidence of the DNA from the virus, which is unique, which is what the PCR test detects. There's also an antigen virus, the protein. So it's a combination of symptomology and getting tested. Can there be false positives? Yes, but there are a lot of negatives. And as you know, there are far more negatives than there are positives. You hear the rates, they're fairly low. But all assays have issues. I have confidence that PCR tests run in what's called a CLIA approved lab, where they have negative and positive controls that are validated, and that they have, and they test over and over again to see that it's rigorous, meaning that, you know, what you can do is you can spike something to see if it picks it, you know, with the real virus, to see if it picks it up. And if it doesn't, it's not working well. And that's why labs get approved. But I know that a lot of these tests have been run in other labs. I don't, for me anyway, the actual exact numbers, this pandemic has really happened. It's been real. There's 500,000 people dead. So I'm not as stuck on that. But I'm sure, I know always with the PCR test, there's always been a risk of false positives and false negatives, as with all assays. But these are the tools that we have. We have to go with the tools that we have. And it is good to test to see where things are happening and if they're rising or falling. It gives us information, but it's not the only information that we use. So I guess I just say, yeah, there's some limits to the assays that are being used. And if possible, one should have their assay, you know, assessed in a CLIA approved lab.
Sure. All right. Thanks.
Good.
Any other questions?
Lots of great information.
A lot of information.
A lot of information. Very helpful.
Oh, well, thank you for all of your questions. And I know everybody is, gosh, we've all been through a lot, but it sounds like you have all had a lot of Zoom meetings every day.
Oh boy.
So you have not been socially distant. You have been physically distanced. And I hope you've all been there for each other and shared some good times too, and laughs. And hey, as I understand it, the real estate business is going great, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know it is where I live now. Apparently,
Yeah, we can't complain. We've been busy.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And Susie explained it to me, but home is so important now.
Now it's become so important because it's part of our daily lives versus before we just came to sleep pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I have a question for anybody that wants to answer it. You know, we really are coming out of this and we learned a lot from it, maybe what to do and what not to do. I want to circle back around before I ask my question to say again, it really was novel. It was new. Not everything could be known. And I think we saw a lot of dedication from a lot of frontline workers and other people to reduce this and to serve each other. And that's really impressive. But what I want to know is, what are you looking forward to as things like go back to normal? And will you keep working at home, or you can't wait to get to the office? You know, what do you see is your biggest change over the next 3 months or so? Is anybody like excited about something that's going to change for them?
And probably this group getting together, because
I was just going to say, getting together in person.
You used to get together
once a week. There would be a meeting where, I don't know, 90 people, would you say, on average on a weekly basis would meet of the group. And it's a very supportive association of people, very supportive of each other through thick and thin. And so it's important for everybody to want to get together in person. I think everybody misses that a lot, just being in person.
Open houses, yeah.
No. You can
I'm
come
really
to mine.
I'm
make a
really,
lot of money off open houses.
That's the only thing that's been on the upside for me with COVID is a seller can't expect you to sit there every Saturday and Sunday.
Hey, it is good for the newer agents trying to get people though, right? They would always put the newer agents out there to get business and meet with them.
That's exactly it. Yeah, yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that. The whole open house phenomena. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was there more virtual showings then?
No, I wouldn't say in our area, probably
No.
not. They physically went there, but I know that I was more particular about who saw my properties. They had to provide a pre-qualification letter or proof of funds to even look at them. Because back in the day, you'd let any agent show anything. And if they weren't pre-qualified, maybe they would get them pre-qualified. But this has been a great way to weed them out to reduce the traffic.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. That really weeded out the looky-loos.
Yeah.
The tire kickers. Yeah.
It's nosy neighbors normally, right?
Right.
They always come to the
I've done
open house.
that. Haven't you done that? I've done that.
I just miss everybody. I'm very social and I can't stand this. I want it to be over and back to what our old normal is. I don't know. Do you
Oh,
think we'll
yeah.
really get to our old normal?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's the paradarian.
In time, but it's going to take a while.
Well,
I
Patricia,
wouldn't mind keeping
very
some of the
social.
outdoor dining. I have liked the al fresco dining. That's kind of fun.
as long as the weather's good, yeah.
Oh, I know. You're right.
But
That'll
realtors
change.
are very social, and what was missing over this last year is there's bowling tournaments and golf tournaments, and
Oh.
there's awards for this and
It's coming
community
back.
benefits for that.
Ballroom dancing.
There's events constantly, and all those had to be canceled. And so I think that everybody's looking forward to just kind of getting that part back to normal too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
It's going to save me a lot of
Susie, you
money.
have to tell me about it. The first big shindig. She'll have to tell me.
I will.
We have a golf tournament coming up
Coming up.
on May 20th, so I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
Going to save me a lot of money next year because instead of my daughter getting married in a venue, it's going to be in my backyard.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So Patricia, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, for your time. We appreciate it. We're going to actually do a drawing. Wendy, are you on?
Thank you, Patricia. It was very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and check out then.
Thank you so much, Patricia.
appreciate
Appreciate it.
it.
Patricia, can you put your email so that we can share if they have any questions? Can they direct them to you?
Yes, Susie, you can give them my Yahoo email.
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank
Okay,
Thanks
you.
for your
sorry I couldn't
time.
answer anything, everything, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to, have a great golf tournament and
Also,
look
this
forward to
was,
hearing about
this
the
was
big-
recorded. Is it okay? Can it be, are you approving it to be shared with people that missed today?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
So we are recording it, and if someone wants a recording, we can actually share it.
Cool.
So just reach out to the board.
Yeah.
We're gonna actually stop recording right now since we're just gonna do
Okay.
the drawing.
Okay, nice meeting you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You.